Hello folks, I'm L.A. Little, and this is your daily TA wrap, where we take a look at these markets from a neoclassical perspective and ask ourselves, what happened today? And what does it tell us about tomorrow? I do a show 4 times a week. I do it Monday through Thursday, live at 9 o'clock Eastern Time here from the base of the beautiful Rocky Mountains. Folks, I used to hear my son when he was a kid. He was playing on his computer and the he's playing some video game or something, right? And I would hear this out of him saying, "You cheater, you cheater." And I'd go in there and it's like, what are you talking about? Well, the computer's cheating me. Well, these markets sometimes cheat you too. They don't always tell you the truth. And that's what we saw today. We saw the Dow Jones and the rest of the markets tick higher, push higher, cheating if you will, right? Because last night they certainly looked like they were going to fall. We had the industrials up 96, 90, almost 97 points, 14,931. The S&P's tacked on 13 and a third, 1653. The composite up 36 and a half, 3649. The NDX up 32 and 3/4, 3124 and a half, and the Russell 9.3 higher, 1025.58. Gold, silver, commodities in general all down today. The dollar was down about 1/3%, and the bonds were down. They're up. All of the commodities are up a little bit after hours. So sometimes the market doesn't tell you exactly what it should tell you, and when that happens, not that I shouldn't say should tell you. It doesn't do what it tells you it's going to do. Right? Last night it was pretty clear, at least from my perspective, that this market was going to try to sell off today. Well, instead of that, it actually went straight up off the opening, hung all day long, never gave it up, and closed over that August 27th bar. That bar 1652.54. We closed at 1653.08. So you get just over it. Volume 33.1 going over 32.1. You had the volume, you got the price. Folks, that says this thing's going to go higher. Now last night it was telling us it was going to go lower. So you flip it around, now you're saying it's going to go higher. And as I go through these, you're going to see most of these are going to say we're going to go higher. So when that happens, and you get a reversal of what should take place, right? The market's telling you that there's more strength there than you think. Of course, you want to know that that's the case, and so you want to see it actually follow through tomorrow and prove it. You're going to have a swing point high here, so it's not going to take very long to prove it. You've just printed 6 bars, so this will actualize tomorrow. That's the August 26th bar. And the top of that guy, 1669. That's going to be the target. If you get over that guy, you're going right back up here to fill the gap. Potentially go to new highs. Now, as we look at the stronger indexes, you're going to see as this one gets up here and plays with this, they're going to be playing with their highs, in particular the NDX. Let's just pop over to that and take a look at it. And you can see here that this one pushed up today, volume expands, and you can see those tops. Now there's multiple swing point highs. That one's going to actualize again as well tomorrow. You've already got one sitting over here. And you're not going to have it on the weekly, but you're going to have it on all the dailies. So that says that you can get a fast move, for a shorter time period, 1 to 2 bars on the short-term time frame. And this thing can push if it gets up there. And believe me, we've seen the bears squeezed so many times that if in fact this gets over it, there's going to be a clamor to get in, which is of course going to give you that 1-2 bar push, and that's going to allow things like the S&P to get over their highs, the swing point highs. Does that mean we're out of the woods? Is the range trade's over? I don't know that that's the case. I wouldn't bet on that yet, but right now the Nasdaq's leading. And the NASDAQ's been where the strength is. You've got the Apple strength. Apple's up, 25% over the last 2 months. Let's pull Apple up and take a look at it. So this thing went from, this is July, so 2 months now. You went from a low of 388, you're at 518, you tacked on over 100 points. That's a 25-30% move, right? NDX is strong because of Apple, period. I mean, there's no way to say it isn't. Apple's 20% of the weighting. A stock that's 20% of the weighting up 30% is going to move the index. There's just no other way about it. What's fascinating to me is that we couldn't get a real sell-off when Apple went from 700 to 400. And here we're going up again, and Apple, of course, the weighting makes a big difference. So when I see things like this, and when I see the NDX, the NASDAQ, the SPYs, or the SPX, even the Dow, breaking back over these key bars, having volume, doing it, that tells me that the read was wrong, most likely, and that if we do see follow through off of this, then this thing's going the other way, and we finally put in some sort of a bottom. And we've been talking about where's the bottom of the range going to be. It looked as if we go back to the SPX, it looked as if this SPX was going to make it down to that 1610 area. Well, the probability of that is decreasing fairly rapidly at this point, and if we do get some more push tomorrow, it's going to pretty much dissipate. So that's the read tonight. Last night turned out not to be the right read, and sometimes that happens. But all the reads give you something; they give you information. We're back over here. This one last night, it also failed. Did have had slightly less volume last night. They all gave us the negative reads, but today they pushed through. This one's back into, and it's going to have 6 bars here, so you're going to have swing point highs again. Now I'm on the NASDAQ. You're going to have swing point highs here, here, and here, 3 of them lined up. In other words, you can get a fast move back to the top side. So you see it across these indexes. You can see what's potentially setting up. You've got Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, the ECB, all those are coming out tomorrow. You've got your unemployment claims tomorrow. You got the unemployment number on Friday, so there's still more eco news coming, central bank news coming. We've got more Fed speakers, and we had another event that took place today, and I want to go intraday and look at that. So if I put up the SPY and bring it into 1 day and put it on like a 10-minute bar, let me get this up here so I can get to it. Put it on like a 10-minute bar, or I put it on a 5-minute. We had news right here on this spike down saying that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee had voted to take it to the full Senate, a vote on Syria. We got a spike down off the top, took them down 25 basis points, which is really nothing. Dribbled around here and then ran up in the end. Folks, if that's all we can get on the Syrian news, that pretty much says it's baked in. Of course, that's not the complete vote, but that certainly didn't move the market very much. So the Syrian news looks to me like it's starting to get baked in pretty good. So the real news is going to be the Federal Reserve and the tapering. And the way this news is going to play out on Syria looks like it's going to take another week or two, which means it's going to run right into the tapering talk and probably end up obscuring it to some degree. So you're going to have all the Syrian news front page for another week or two, which is going to take away from the sting, if you will, to some extent, I guess, from what's happening with the Fed. All right, so that's the indexes. Let's look at the major sectors. My take here is that they're probably going to tell us the same thing. We'll see if they actually print that way. Remember, many of these were the most negative last night because they were all starting to break down again. Here's the IYT. It still isn't back over the August 26 bar, but this one actually positive last night. Looked like it could come back up. It is going to try to attack that. And the 6 bar, if it doesn't get over it, Well, actually, it's going to print six. This is going to print as a swing point high too. So now we're going to have two swing point highs up here on the way back up, and they're pushing volume on this thing. So that's actually a good thing from a bullish perspective. If I go look at the SMHs, remember we started taking the SMHs and looking at them instead of the SOX. So they do 521,000. They push into the resistance zone. They don't have the volume. That was a toss-up because the high there was 38.29 and you closed at 38.29. So you closed right on it with less volume. We'll see if it can actually get over it tomorrow or not. That it should fail, but so I don't see that one actually benefiting the market tomorrow. Let me see here, the XLB. Now the XLB came right back, does a full. Let me see, that high on the candle was, the open was 41.03, and we closed at 41.16. So that's an engulfing, a bullish engulfing of that prior candle. This thing's going to try to go higher. It's got more volume and engulfed it. Yeah, that looks like it's going to try to go higher. So XLB still hanging, and XLB has been one of the stronger ones because that's, of course, all your industrial metals and materials and so forth. XLE, this had been the strongest one and still looks that way and is pushing up on that ABCD again. So your A point's down here on the low, your B point was here, your C point was the pullback. You got over it on the next day, then you pulled back under it, but now you're back over it again and you're pushing. So you're A, B, C, and now you're going to try to push it, and if I remember right, that takes you right up towards the highs, the projection on it. Takes you right into the top of that resistance zone. So that one actually looks to push higher. XLF. Okay, the XLF gets over the August 26th bar. Doesn't have the volume, but it's over it. Again, tomorrow is a critical day. You got a lot of news again tomorrow, and now you've got the setup for the bulls to squeeze higher. And if they in fact can get a push tomorrow, we have seen so many V-shaped recoveries that I can't even remember how many there were. And if this gets going again, you can see it doing the same thing one more time. So XLF over the highs from August 26th over that bar down. Tomorrow will be critical for it to follow through. Here's the XLI doing the same thing. It's over it, doesn't have the volume. Again, needs follow through. XLK, this one should print pretty strong tonight. Last night it really didn't give us a sign. Top of that bar 31.73, closes 31.74. It's got the volume. XLK wants to push higher. The XLP, now the two weakest ones. I believe this one actually did a doji. No, this is, I think it was the utilities I saw earlier did the doji. Okay, so here's another one. This should have failed and came back the other way, and instead it flipped around and does a bullish engulfing of the prior candle. So here again, another story where a complete reversal in one of your weakest sectors. XLU is the utilities. The utilities are the ones that did the doji, less volume. This one also wants to try to flip around. So it comes into this big bar, projects right out of there, even though it had an ABCD down. And that ABCD was up here from the swing point high all the way down to this low. The bounce was to there, and then it looked like it was going to follow through. And that follow through would have taken it down below the lows. It would have been the first to break on an intermediate term time frame, as you could have seen over here, right? It would have been a break there. But not to be, it looks like, as of tonight. If I look at the XLV, healthcare is a sector that's really worth looking at. If you're looking for exposure in something that's a little bit safer and has the growth potential, right? XLP, companies in there, they're not going to grow much. Your big drug companies are not going to grow that much, but you've got a lot of smaller companies that also make up this sector that can grow, and you've got things like Amgen in it that are moving. So you can see how this one is back up, testing resistance, and it looks to me like it's gonna have a shot over it. And it didn't even print the swing point high, 50.17. Yeah, it will. So tomorrow that will print as a high. It was 1 penny higher. So you get a high here tomorrow, you can break it tomorrow, and it looks like it's going to probably do it. The consumer discretionary is the XLY, and just like the others, it had set up an ABCD down. That ABCD came from this high back on August 9th to this low, back up, and it broke under it. But as you can see, it's about to go back over to C point. Once it does, that ABCD is dead. So that's these sectors. These sectors all flipped around just as you would have expected from what we saw in the indexes, and they all look to complement what the indexes are doing. Now, if I go in and look at the OX markets, in particular the bonds sold off yesterday pretty hard. Today, the bonds actually did an inside, not an inside day. They went back over yesterday's high and then back under it again. So that tells me they are going to try to work back down into support zone again. So I wouldn't be buying them here, but as they get back down and test this low and test back into this bar, towards the low of that bar, it's probably going to be that's when it's going to get interesting on the buy side. Now, everybody and their mother is against bonds at this point, and they say it's just going to continue down. I suspect you're going to see these bonds stabilize. Now, what's really interesting to me, and I see a comment over here that it seems like they believe that the Fed is going to hold back because of the Syrian issue. That could be the case. You know, that may be the case. These bonds are saying that we've already, whether it's, let's think about it a different way. The bonds, at least the way they're behaving so far, are indicating that they've already discounted the tapering. In other words, already in the price. So interest rates already moved up to what they're going to move up to for the most part. And you've already had the sell-off in the bonds for the most part. And that was a pretty good sell-off. I mean, if you go look at the weekly, that was a big sell-off, right? You went from 124.5 down to 102. That's a 20%, 20-25% about a 20% haircut straight away. 5 months, 4.5, 5 months. These are going to stabilize. If this read here is correct, then that tapering is not going to have that big effect probably on the equities once the news actually prints. And if the Syrian situation overrides in the sense that it's more of a distraction, it actually probably helps the market, right? Because we're not so focused on the tapering. So it's just the way this thing is reading. The bonds are trying to tell us that the tapering is not going to take us lower when it finally prints. And let's see, so elsewhere we had the dollar. Let's look at the dollar. So the dollar comes in some today. It looked like it was going to last night because last night it tested a swing point high, didn't have the juice. It comes back and actually volume expands. That's not a good thing. That looks to me like it will make it back into this prior swing point high it broke. It's 22.16. It got to 22.18. I would think it hits it tomorrow. Let's take a look at the FXE, see if that seems to jive with it. And swing point low here is 130.31. Got it low as 130.07. And then today was 130.31. So it went right to it, bounced off of it again. So you got the doji under it, back over. You got the spike up today. There's no volume here. And now it's coming back into this swing point low prior, 130.75, closed into it. So again, tomorrow will be a big day here, and it should be. Tomorrow is the central banks telling us what they're going to do. So we'll see if the euro actually sells off tomorrow or not. And I don't know that this makes a huge difference to the market. The market has worked higher despite a strong dollar and in spite of a weak dollar. It doesn't really seem to matter. The yen. So they sold the yen off on the idea that we would see more money coming out of the BOJ. We'll see that tomorrow. This just looks to go lower, folks. There's really no ABCD structures here in place, but it just looks to try to work lower. Then we had commodities. So the USO's pulling back. That's the oil market. Just slightly, nothing big there. And that's probably going to be able to hang there for a while given the Syrian situation. The JJC is just bouncing around. Let's look at the gold and silver. Now gold and silver both had pushed up. They got to move back down, and then they spiked up, which is very common. And now they came down, but what's interesting, let me see here, 7.659, 7.731. So you get slightly higher volume, you get under, back over, but it holds, but you're into this bar still. Still looks like it's going to try to get to the bottom of that bar. Let's see if silver shows the same. On the silver market, and yeah, silver looks like it's going to hold here. 22.38, 22.61. Yeah, probably will test support and hold. So we may not get much of a pullback, but on gold itself and silver, it really just depends on what happens in the Middle East right now, because it's all headline driven right now. And given the situation, I suspect these things hang up here for a while. They're not going to give it up easy. Okay, so let's see what kind of questions you got. Oh, the junk bonds. I haven't looked into junk bonds in a while. There's a question about them, so let's pull them up and see what they look like. So the question over here is, so if the bonds are going to try to work higher, then the junk bonds ought to try to do the same. And yeah, that probably is true. So let's see what they did. So there's an inside day, more volume. Yeah, I don't see any tail there yet. Let's see what the weekly looks like. Okay, so the weekly came down, nice steep drop. You spring up on nothing, now you're back down. Just like bonds want to test a little bit lower potentially, this also looks to try to test these 3 bars lows, which is right at the bottom of the support zone on the weekly. So that price point is 39.15. We're closing today 39.30, was it? 39.41. So you couldn't get another 30 cents, another percent down into this big bar and testing that swing point low again. Because if you look at the TLT, and maybe I wasn't clear about it, but if I look at the TLT, that also looks to test a little bit lower, right? Because it's the second bar now that it can't get out of this bar. The big bar up, top of it is 104.39. We got above it, closed inside of it yesterday. We got above it, closed inside of it again today, less volume. Tested yesterday, couldn't go up higher, stay higher. This thing looks like it's going to trade back down towards the bottom of this bar. Certainly back into support, back into the bottom of this bar from the third, but potentially, more than likely actually, into the bottom of this, 102.74. And if you see support gather here, then you can get your turn, right? Begin, and you can get a higher high, because you can start to see people seeing that the big sell-off is doing some sort of a rounding bottom, as they like to say. Another question here about the DIA. I'd rather look at the Dow Jones. Let me pull that back up and look at it. Today it actually traded back over the August 27th bar. And so, if it can get a push tomorrow, this can get a move. Now, this has been the weakest index, though. If I'm going to trade an index, I'm probably just going to pick one of the stronger ones. So 14.39, 14.939 and a quarter. We closed at 14.9. Oh, I take it back. This one actually did not. 14.39. Oh, I missed this. I thought it traded over it and closed over it. It traded over it but closed under it. Has slightly more volume. Just barely, so it will trade into it again tomorrow more than likely and test it one more time. But if I were going to trade the indexes, I'd probably go with the strong ones, and that would be the NDX, the IXCX, so the Nasdaq Composite, the NDX, or the Russell. And the Russell's setting up. I believe the Russell's going to have, it's going to print a swing point high here as well. And you can see how it's been consolidating in the last 2 days, been pushing volume. If it gets over this little area, it's going to go for the swing point high up into the resistance zone. So if I'm going to trade these markets, I'm probably going to reach over into one of these, not the weakest one. And why are the volumes different is a question. There's two reasons. One is everybody gets a different feed. But the other one is that I have a 32-bit problem with the programming language that we use. And so the 32 bits can extend on a weeklies and monthlies to actually have the correct volume, so we divide it by 10. And since we're using a constant divider, then we end up, it's apple to apple, so it doesn't really matter. So if you look at the SPX, for example, and it will still be different probably than your stock charts or some of the others, because the different feeds give you different numbers. So this number here shows at 33.1. It really is times 10, right? So you have 330. So that's the reason for the numbers differences. But to me, what's important is that you just keep using the same numbers over and over, right? Because then the comparison is straight away. XLP, even with this, so another question, even with the bullish engulfing, it looks like it failed on price and volume. Let me go back over to the XLP. So this is one of the weakest sectors. So it had a bullish engulfing. It was trading up against. Yeah, it did. Yeah, you had 39.83, and today closed at 39.73. So you failed on price and volume. So this still could do another ABCD down. Again, I wouldn't be, the way I try to read, and it's not always the same, but the way I try to read the markets is if we see strength, I want to see the strong sectors strong, and I want to see some strength in the weak sectors. If we're going down, I want to see the weak sectors lead us, initially, and then I want to see the strong ones get weak as well. So the fact that this one is failing, for example, I don't give as much weight if the strong things are getting stronger, because they're the ones that will lead us out of a dip. Now, once we get up, once we start running, if in fact that's what happens, then you got to see it broaden out, and you want to see the other sectors start to catch up, right? I mean, they should start to outperform, because what that tells you is you got money rotation, right, which can keep things going. So, when you're first coming out of a downdraft like now, what you're looking for is your strong sectors to lead you up. And so if I'm looking at this, for example, I would want to look to the XLE. I want to see the XLE go take out the highs, certainly break this swing point high. Once I see sectors start to do ABCDs up, in the case of this one, this is the only one doing it right now. Then I want to see them take out key areas, swing point highs, go test the the all-time, not all-time, but the recent highs and so forth, and try to break out. And if we look at the indexes, you want the same thing. You want to see the strongest index doing exactly the same thing, because they're the ones that will lead you to start with. And if in fact they can take you to new highs, like the NDX, go break these swing point highs and get the push, then you can get the follow through elsewhere and have others start to play catch up on the rotation. So once this one takes a break, then the money rotates into something else. So, on the turn, the strong ones are the ones that want to take you up. On the turn down, the weak ones are the ones you want to watch to see if they take you down. All right, so my take here, last night, totally wrong. Market gave us signals, and the signals turned out to be exactly the opposite of what happened. When it does that, you have to wake up. You have to say, okay, that's the way it is. I told the members in the TNT room today is like, okay, I missed the trade this morning. I wasn't participating because I was coming in with a bearish frame of mind. one of the hardest things to do is to flip around and say, okay, I got to do the opposite. And that's what I told folks in the room today about, I don't know, 10, 11 o'clock. It's like this thing's going to hang and probably try to squeeze higher at the end. And that's what it did. And you had to try to trade it that way if you were going to trade it intraday. All right, folks, I'm going to leave it at that. I thank you for being there. You tell a friend, tell two. I'm L.A. Little. This is and was your daily TA wrap. You have yourself a great night, and we'll see what the various central banks want to do to us tomorrow and see if this thing actually follows through. Have a great one. Take care. Good night, folks.